lifestyle as medicine, and of course we've got the coronavirus going on. So we have lots to talk about. Why don't you give us a little bit of a background first on yourself?
Thanks so much for having me on, Mike. Yes, you're right. So I'm speaking to you from London, England, where we've recently gone into lockdown here. And I think a lot of people have, been stocking up in the last few weeks. Unfortunately, some people have been panic buying. But today I'm just going to kind of give people a little bit of an idea for what they can do to help themselves as much as possible with following a healthy lifestyle, particularly with a focus on diet. I have been a nutritionist for a few years. I had a change in career. I worked in marketing for the food industry before, so very different.
Yeah. That's a big change.
Yeah, so I have my own practice here in London, and I really kind of advise people on how to transition to a whole foods plant-based way of eating. Now, a lot of them are not vegan, but many of them are, and they're sort of trying to move away maybe from the more processed vegan foods to eating more plant foods and whole plant foods. So the one surprising thing about this pandemic is really that a lot of the most shelf stable and pantry friendly staples are in fact plant based, and I think that a lot of more people are now cooking with like lentils and grains and things like that. I'm seeing in my local supermarket the things that were always very fully stocked, and I would always be one of the few people maybe buying them. They're now completely gone, and that does make me happy that people at least are buying lentils and things as well, though. That's a good sign, I think.
Well, I have a question. I've always kind of thought, or maybe assumed, I don't know. Well, I've heard the saying, the longer the shelf life, the shorter yours. But at this point in time, we need to potentially buy foods that have a longer shelf life, but are still healthy. We need to boost our immune system. So what types of foods can somebody buy that are going to remain stable in someone's home for a long period of time, yet still will help our immune system and help keep us healthy?
I think that's a great point, and it's important not to sort of tarnish all foods with the same brush here, because I think there are definitely some foods where you'll see the expiry date and it will be sort of 10 years time, and that doesn't exactly seem great. But there are a lot of foods out there, and as food scientists have become more experienced, we're able to preserve foods safely without using all the extra sodium sometimes, or the extra oil and preservatives and things like that. So it's important not to demonize all foods. For example, a lot of frozen foods, such as frozen berries, a lot of them are actually frozen at the time of harvest, so they're incredibly high in some nutrients, and the same applies for a number of other processing techniques. So it's we need to really bust those myths at a time like this, because people are just not able to get as much fresh food as they'd like. I mean, I personally am using up what's in my pantry right now, and I think it's a great time to look at what you have in your pantry and realize that you can make amazing, very simple meals that are very nutritious still. And I am using frozen vegetables, frozen food, some canned foods. Like I have here, so I have like beans, for example, and I use BPA free cans or glass jars. These are lupin beans, for example. So I think those sorts of things are really great, and I know that I'm getting all meeting my nutritional needs. And obviously, if you can look at cans and check that they have no added sodium or oil or sugar, that would be ideal. But right now, people need to do the best they can, and if it's causing a huge amount of stress, that's not healthy either. So I recommend making a simple grocery list if you are doing sort of a grocery shop once every few days or once a week at this time, and seeing what's available. A lot of stores, unfortunately, now don't have as much food as we'd like, so we have to be mindful of that and of other people.
Right. Actually, one of the things you mentioned was interesting to me. You mentioned frozen at the time of harvest. And I always know, like, if I was to pick something right in the field and eat it, it tastes so much better. How do you know if something is treated like that, frozen right away, and it's ripe? How do you know?
Unfortunately, don't exactly know, but it tends to be the case for things like berries, for example. I live in London, England, where if I go and buy some berries here in the supermarket, a lot of the times there are blueberries have come from Peru. That's sort of the main place that we get blueberries. now, by the time they've flown over here, not only is the carbon footprint massive if you're someone who's environmentally friendly, but also berries, the vitamin C is already just, gone at that point. So frozen blueberries are a great alternative. And there are certain cases in which processing foods in that way actually increases their nutritional value. So for tomatoes, fresh tomatoes are rich in vitamin C, and it's true that sort of canned tomatoes have less vitamin C generally. But actually processing tomatoes, such as into tomato sauce like passata, actually is higher in lycopene, which is a very powerful antioxidant. And there's some studies showing that it's particularly powerful for prostate cancer prevention and things like that. So let's not tarnish all foods with the same brush. But yeah, I think where you can, a mixture of fresh and frozen would be ideal. That's what I try to do personally. So I try to eat fresh fruit like apples and pears and things that are local and seasonal and things like that to me, because they're higher in nutritional value. But I also buy some frozen berries and things like that to add to my meals, and things like frozen kale and frozen spinach. They're very easy to throw into a curry or into a smoothie, and unfortunately things like spinach really doesn't last long in our fridges, so it's good to have that option there. I think that that's a good option for people. I think a mix is great, and if you've got things like bananas and they're going very ripe and spotty, that's a good time to freeze them, and then they make really creamy, thick smoothies or banana ice cream, which you could look up a recipe. But I think that those are really great. Yeah,
that's is way better, like a banana and ice cream, in my opinion. And please let me know what you think. Than the faux animal product ice creams that are plant-based. I look at some of those ingredient lists and they are very long, and I don't recognize a lot of them.
Yeah, a lot of the time they have a lot of emulsifiers and different things, and particularly if you've got sort of issues with digestion, like if you have IBS or something like that, they can sort of wreak havoc. But for most people, they're fine as a very occasional treat. They're not really something to have on the daily. So if you're craving something cold and smooth, I think the frozen bananas with frozen berries, and you could add a dash of sweetener like maple syrup if you wanted it to be sweeter. But I think that's a great snack for kids for sure.
Okay, good. So you mentioned in your practice, you talk with people that are in all types of lifestyles, and it sounds like you're meeting people where they are, which is great. Really, you need to do that. I have a question though. Like, if you're in a time like this with coronavirus, and we understand that our immune systems need to be at the highest level, what would you recommend to keep our immune systems up at that high level at this point in time?
I think that it's important to try and eat as many whole plant foods as possible. Get the variety in if possible, and you have access to these foods. And eat the rainbow if you can. So try to eat different coloured fruits and vegetables every day. I think that that's really great to get a range of the phytonutrients in, as well as supplementing if you are on a plant-based diet with vitamin B12. And now, because we're not really going outside much, I also take my vitamin D as well every single day. And especially if you're living in the northern latitudes like the UK, it was a sunny day today, but it's actually not powerful enough for our body to manufacture vitamin D. So I think eating all of that, there is some research to show that fermented foods is very helpful for the immune system. So adding in a serving of that would be a great thing. So something like sauerkraut or kimchi, they would be good things to add into your salad or your Asian stir fries, for example. But I think, cooking from scratch, I think one of the things is, obviously this is devastating what's happening right now around the world, but you can take one positive that can be taken from it is that people are cooking more at home and cooking more from scratch. So learning some new cooking techniques, brushing up on your knife skills, learning a couple of new recipes, learning how to cook without oil, for example, or cooking more plant-based recipes. I have a lot of recipes on my website, rohinibajekal.com, and I also post several recipes every single week on my Instagram. So at the moment, I'm doing lots of recipes that are just like plant-based staples. So just using simple things. So I've got things here like tahini. I think that's like a great thing to make quick, simple salad dressings or sauces, and things like nutritional yeast. So just 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast have 4 grams of protein. So all this little helps, to make sure that especially for older adults, they do require slightly more protein, and it's very easy to get all the protein you need on a plant-based diet, but right now, I think these sorts of things are very good to add to the diet, and for sure for a lot of people who can't make it out of the house easily.
Okay, what is your Instagram?
It's at Rohini Bajekal, so that's at ROHINI BAJEKAL, and I'm very active on it. I post like almost all the food that I make and lots of nutrition tips, and share lots of other resources from brilliant people such as yourself. And you know, I want people to be able to access this information right now, because it's such a critical time where we need to knowledge share, and people, you know, we have an opportunity to try to help ourselves as much as possible now, and look after each other and learn how important lifestyle is. Obviously, one single food or supplement is not going to prevent you from getting a virus, and it's irresponsible of any nutritionist or dietitian to say that, because that's just completely untrue. And the New York Times has reported that these supplement sales are skyrocketing, and that's really not where people need to be spending their money. They need to be sleeping 7 to 9 hours, you know, finding ways to quell the anxiety that is all around us at the moment, and eating a healthy plant-based diet, or mostly plant-based diet, as much as they can.
Okay, so there's no magic pill. It's the overall lifestyle and what you do. But let me ask you another question. Diet is very important. I say that's probably one of the most important components, right?
Extremely important, yes.
If someone is not following the proper diet, they're hardly eating any plants, is it worth them suddenly changing? I mean, how long does it take to have positive results in the body?
It has instant results, so we know that the results are instant. Obviously, you may not, you know, have the same benefits as someone who's been doing it for a really long time, but it's never too late to start. Usually when I transition clients, I tell them, particularly to get used to the amount of fiber, I tell them that they can transition over a few weeks or a few months. Everyone's body is different, so it depends on what your diet was before. But you can start eating more plant foods straight away, and really the earlier the better. So the first meal I recommend changing to a plant-based meal is breakfast, and that's great because all of these come in Tetra Paks, which are very shelf stable. This is organic soy milk, and it just literally contains soy and water, but you can get lots of others like hemp milk and things like that in the stores. And a lot of people
too, right?
Yeah, a lot of people are trying these milks right now because obviously cow's milk doesn't last very long, and hopefully they're going to be trying oat milk and soy milk and all of these other great milks. So I think breakfast is the easiest meal to make plant-based. Get in those oats, those berries, bananas, nuts, seeds, dried fruit is good, and it's in small amounts, and some plant milk. I think that's a great way to kickstart your plant-based journey, but then also crowd out those other foods and add in the good ones. So if you're not used to a lot of fiber, unfortunately only 1 in 10 British adults gets enough fiber at the moment, which is only 30 grams. So 9 out of 10 aren't getting enough fiber. So if you stocked up on all that toilet roll and you want to use it, then I recommend
you don't need to use it.
then I recommend like gradually adding this in. So for these beans, for example, you would add in sort of like a tablespoon every few days, add in 2 tablespoons, 3, gradually, you know, end up being, I can eat a whole can of beans or a couple of cans with no side effects, but for other people, they might be less. Lentils, red lentils, split red lentils are an amazing one to start with because they're very easy to digest. So split red lentils are very quick to cook, and you can make amazing dals and curries and stews and soups with them.
Yeah, actually, that's one of the things that I have bought recently that I've not cooked with before. You mentioned starting new recipes and trying new things, and that's one of the things I've been trying, and I agree. That's a great food to have.
Definitely, and they're so high in protein and fiber, and you know, 1 cup of chickpeas has 18 grams of fiber, of protein, sorry, and it really packs the punch. So I think legumes, they're so cheap, they're so affordable, they're everywhere, they last for months, up to, you know, years even in the larder. So everyone should be going and, you know, filling their baskets with that at the supermarket, really.
Yes, you mentioned fiber and adding it in slowly. I mean, my experience has been that the body, even if you're doing something wrong and transition to something right, doesn't like to change, right? So it'll kind of, you'll notice some things and say, oh, well, this isn't, someone might say, this isn't right for me. Like, this has never happened before. It's not good, but that's going to be a transition, right? There's always going to be that's normal, is what I'm asking?
That's completely normal. And, you know, people often, especially attune to any changes in their body when they are switching their diet around, but not all change is bad. Obviously, like I said, I recommend easing in and adding things in rather than immediately sort of cutting everything out. If you add in more colorful vegetables, more whole grains, more beans, more lentils, more nuts, all of this, you're going to have less space for the animal products like the meat and the fish and the dairy and the eggs. So that's a better mindset. And I always say to people, think of it as a positive thing. This is a positive thing that you are changing your lifestyle for the better. So if you have a positive mindset, you are going to see nothing but positivity there, and get excited about new recipes, new cuisines from around the world, stocking up your cupboard and saving money probably on your grocery shop as well. And if you've got some flatulence or gas to start with, there are lots of tips that I've shared on my site. So adding in things like cumin and asafoetida, which is an Indian spice that really helps with bloating, soaking the beans and lentils, those are all tips, just a few of the tips. I've got lots of them, but these can really help you adjust. And a lot of people might not know how to cook these products, but there are loads of YouTube tutorials out there, so just get onto YouTube and have a look.
Right. Okay, you mentioned cost.
Yeah.
I know that if folks are going to be buying the vegan products, right, those tend to be more expensive in my opinion, but the things that you're talking about they're not products, they are more whole foods, right? Is that right?
Exactly. No, definitely. The more convenient vegan foods can be really expensive. So things like vegan cheese and stuff like that, is vegan magnums. They are tasty, but they're very, very expensive, and they come with like a lot of plastic, a lot of packaging, and I don't think they're the most healthful ingredients. So in terms of chickpeas are the cheapest protein source in the world. So in terms of bang for your buck, they're a great one. But all of these foods, some of all these countries around the world, like I'm Indian, my family is Indian, and most of the diet is really plant-based and formed on these staples, and the food is delicious. So the most important thing I'd recommend investing in is a good spice cupboard, because you really need to add like flavor to the food, and we know that herbs and spices can boost the antioxidant capacity of a meal by up to 200%. So I'm very liberal with my spices, and I like the way that they taste. And it's hard to get these fresh herbs right now, and if you're lucky enough to have a little herb garden, all you need is a windowsill really to sprout or to have herbs around. Sprouts, again, living foods full of micronutrients. They're great to add to your salads. A big handful. Herbs like basil, coriander, parsley, and thyme, and that's great. But dried spices and herbs are just as good really, so add them in as much as you like, and they're very cheap again. So yeah, just experiment.
Okay, you mentioned sprouting. Okay, I've bought a lot of times recently sprouted quinoa. There's sprouted grains you can buy. Is there an advantage to buying those, and what is it if there is one?
Definitely. I think when you sprout grains or sprout those foods, they're generally the nutrients are more bioavailable, because the amount of phytates, which is sort of inhibit the absorption of iron and calcium and things, is reduced. So in the US, I actually noticed you have a lot more sprouted products than we have here in England. So things like sprouted oats and things like that, they're just a lot easier to digest, and again, the nutrients are probably more available. So if you can buy them or sprout them at home, I think a sprouting I don't know what they're called, I guess a sprouting jar, they're very cheap, but now Amazon and all these things aren't really delivering much. So if you've got access to buying sprouted ones, then definitely recommend. Or even just soaking. I soak all my lentils and beans for like 6 to 8 hours, and that's the sort of standard. It also reduces cooking time, which is convenient, because you don't want to spend ages slaving over a stove right now.
Correct. Okay, one thing you mentioned previously earlier in this discussion was cooking without oil.
Yes.
That's something I've had to get used to over the years. I'm not much of a chef, but one of the things I thought was a little different in the beginning part anyway was sauteing with water instead of oil. Is that the way it's normally done? If you're sauteing without oil, you use water?
Yes, well, you can use a bunch of different things, and I really recommend. Again, I learned it from YouTube, having a look at some of the people doing it, because I was trying to wrap my head around it at first and think, how on earth do you cook without olive oil? Isn't that supposed to be healthy?
Right.
But no, you can cook. You can saute with vinegar. You can saute with wine if you want to go all out. You know, obviously, wine, I'm not recommending it as a health food, but it evaporates and adds some flavor. I like sauteing with some vegetable stock, some homemade vegetable stock that sort of adds some flavor. And I also like cooking my grains sometimes in low sodium vegetable stock, and that gives it a really nice, lovely flavor. But when you're sauteing, it's just, you know, you just got to be patient and not burn things. And it's really very easy. If it dries up, you can just deglaze the pan with a little bit more hot water. It's quite simple. It kind of you need to get your head around it. But the tastes just as good. It's not the oil that adds the flavor, that's all the other things, like the herbs and spices, like I mentioned, and the seasoning, if you use things like dulse flakes or nori flakes and things like that to add a little kind of more flavor.
Okay, and I also noticed too, when you're using the water, or I like the suggestion of vinegar or vegetable stock, low sodium, like you said. You have to keep adding it though. It's not like the oil never goes anywhere, right? It seems like you put it in and you're done, right? But these things, they evaporate.
You like watch it for a little bit longer, and a lot of people like using an instant pot. That's not really a popular thing in Europe, but I could be wrong. But it's definitely, I don't have one, but I've seen lots of instant pot recipes, and I know that those are really handy to have. But again, you just got to be patient and learn how to do it. Just watch the pan for a little bit so you don't burn it, because obviously burnt food is not ideal for health, and ruins the flavor completely.
Okay. Well, I mean, thank you so much for all of this advice. And I feel like right now, as I'm sure you probably feel, is a great time. It's a great motivation for people to make this change, you know, because we have time. A lot of people have time on their hands. They may have less money. Like you said, the whole plant foods are probably like the least expensive way you can go. You just got to take a little bit of time to learn how to cook them, so it goes great with what's happening right now. And then of course we want to boost our immune system, so it's going to help with that too. So it's
definitely. And people, you know, just really, they don't need to worry too much. They just need to try and buy what's available. If they can buy fresh, that's great, but a mixture of fresh, frozen, canned, you know, things like that. Just checking that there's not much added sodium, salt, or oil to the food, and getting involved in like learning about the different products. I've been snacking on a lot of like popcorn, which is a whole grain, and that's really great. You can make that at home and make a nutritional yeast topping. So that's great for movie night if you're, you know, spending more time at home now, which we all should be. So I recommend.
With the popcorn, do you pop it or do you eat it the way that it is?
No, it needs to be popped. So I pop it on the stove, and there's actually like an oil-free technique that I use, and then I make my own topping with like nutritional yeast, or I use an Indian masala, and that's really nice for when you're watching a movie and you just, you know, want something to snack on, but you don't want to go for the, you know, the candy or the chocolate or anything. And I just think that this is the time to experiment with more, you know, wholesome plant-based snacks. And I think popcorn is one, but you can also make really nice things. Like if you've got overripe bananas, you can make banana bread with dates instead of using sugar and flaxseed and things as a binder. So this is the time to try all those things you've always wanted to do, and you know, try eating more plant-based if possible. And I think that it's something that everyone can do. It's just about making those simple changes to your lifestyle. And if you're already plant-based, then that's great, but you can always, you know, take things up a notch, introducing fermented foods and learning new recipes. I think I'm always learning. I think I probably learn a new dish almost every week. So I think there's a lot of exciting things out there. And take your B12 and vitamin D, and make sure that
thanks for the reminder. I will do that today.
I know, unfortunately we're not able to enjoy the sunshine, but hopefully the more we do this, the more we all stay home, the quicker we will be able to you know, get back out there. But it's really important right now that people stay home and stay healthy.
And one thing about that, one last thing before we go, that varies depending upon the time of the year, the angle of the sun, and things like that, right? So in the summer you don't have to worry about so much, but in the colder months you really have to be concerned about it, right?
Definitely, but I think there are certain groups that have to take vitamin D all year round. For example, people with you know, darker skin, such as myself, or people who are housebound, such as people who are elderly and not really, you know, getting out of the house much, which is going to be a lot of us this year, to be honest. So we really need to get that taken care of. And one last thing I would mention is if you are buying fresh produce at the moment, it's important to wash it with some, if you have some produce, there's special soap that you can get for vegetables and fruits, but if not, I think a little bit of normal soap would work as long as you rinse it off thoroughly. But it's important if you're buying sort of loose produce, such as red bell peppers or apples or something that may have been touched a lot in the store,
Right.
it's important to be mindful of that, obviously.
You don't know where it's been, but so you need to make sure that's clean. Yeah.
Definitely, and it's important to again, not make food a source of massive anxiety. It shouldn't be stressing you out to the point where you're not living your life. But this is actually very simple. Following a plant-based diet is very, very simple. It just requires a little bit of an adjustment in terms of learning a few new things, but it's very exciting. I have been thriving on it for years. My family's been thriving on it for years, and I honestly think it's one of the best things I've done in my life. So if you're on the, you're teetering on the edge, you're not quite sure whether to go for it, I say go for it. DM me if you've got any questions, or write to me. I'm very approachable.
I'll put your website, a link to your Instagram and your website here on the video. So we'll have that right below here. And well, thank you, Rohini. Thank you so much for being with us. And food and nutrition advisor for plantbaseddiet.org. And of course, you've got your website and Instagram. We'll have those linked below, so you guys can just go there and follow her. And
I've got lots of simple recipes as well, so very, very simple, cheap and affordable, with some nutritional info on my site. So go and check those out if you're looking for some inspiration as well.
Okay, great. So hopefully we will get to talk again in the near future, and when everyone has taken this time to change their lifestyle and is moving forward, right?
Definitely. Well, yeah, thank you for all the work you do, Mike, and thank you for having me on. It's been really nice to chat to you and talk to you more about what people can do to help themselves and help their overall health at home.
You're welcome. Thank you.